to the TIMFD podcast. Today is my favorite day, and this is where we learn how to make the most of each day, even when life shows up with those unexpected plot twists we didn't see coming. If this episode encourages you, would you please take a second to like, share, and comment? Now, let's find out how today can be our favorite day.
Welcome, everybody. I have Randy Pandis back. You've seen him before on different podcasts we've done, but Randy has a unique history behind him and what's going on in history today. So, for one, Randy is a military child, right? You grew up in the military, with the military, and you're a military person yourself. What branch of the military did you and your dad work with, and then you?
My father was Air Force pilot, etc., and then I was Army, Corps of Engineers, combat engineers. So yeah.
So what would you do with that? What does that mean? For someone like a layperson like you?
Yeah. So there's basically two types of engineers in the Army. There's the ones that kind of have the big equipment and they can do like build roads and hardcore construction, and then you have guys that are more like glorified infantry, which is what I was, and our mission was to be with what are called maneuver units, tank units, or infantry units, and so on, right there in the front, sometimes ahead of them, either clearing obstacles, putting obstacles in place, blowing things up, that kind of stuff. Wow. So we were, right there with the grunts, so to speak.
And so what brought you into the military, before we get into anything else, what brought you into the military? Was it your dad because of his background? And I thought you had other family that was in the military.
Yeah, well, there's three boys. I have an older brother and a younger brother. My brother started out as a Marine and then transferred into the Navy later on. He's also a pilot. And then my younger brother was Navy Intel. Okay. And then my father was Air Force. So we covered all four branches between the four of us. Wow. And then I had uncles and stuff that were Navy. And one of my uncles was on the Vestal, which was next alongside the Arizona when it was sunk at Pearl Harbor.
Really?
He survived. He was missing for a couple of days because he got blown off the deck, but he survived it. So there's a lot of kind of Navy, and they were all California people. So, I've got some California people in my family tree as well. But sure. I was in college ROTC. Okay. First, I did it just for fun because, I was kind of interested in it. And then they awarded me a scholarship while I was in college. So once you accept a scholarship, you commit to 4 years after you graduate. And so I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated college anyway. So I thought, well, fine, then I'll just go in the Army and do that. Yeah. So I did. And, it was a good opportunity for me. I'm glad I did it, learned a lot of things, and met a lot of really good people. Yeah.
Thank you for your service, for one, and your whole family. But what I want to do is, Randy brought up just casually as we were talking, he said, hey, by the way, with the whole Iran thing going on right now, I lived in Iran. I went, what? And so can you kind of explain how that even happened? And then some of your experiences when you're in Iran, what you saw in Iran before the revolution took place.
Right. Yeah. So I was there.
We have a bunch of pictures. You're not going to get to see them,
You're not going to be able to see this stuff I was looking for. But anyway, I was there in 1977 and 78, which, if you know anything about Iranian history and the Iranian Revolution, that was right when it was happening, and we left. My family left as a result of the Islamic Revolution, and I left the country in December of '78. But
that's what this ticket is for. He still has his ticket.
Yeah, I still have my airline ticket back in the day when they would write out airline ticket, and it goes from Tehran to Copenhagen to New York to Atlanta to Macon. And then there's pictures of me in Iran and stuff. But we were there because my father was retired Air Force, and the Shah of Iran was buying the best military equipment from whoever made it in the world. So when you think aviation and it's always American aircraft that are the best. So they had Lockheed C-130s, and that's what my father was there for. He was helping them run their maintenance program for the C-130. And then like my brother, who graduated from Tehran American, he was the last graduating class from Tehran American School. He was a senior in 78 when he graduated.
They were in the embassy?
And we did, the graduation was on the embassy grounds. Wow. So they were the last graduating class. And he worked for Bell Helicopter after he graduated. My brother-in-law worked for Bell. So they bought Bell helicopters. They bought Lockheed C-130s. They bought Grumman F-14 Tomcats. They had F-4 Phantoms. They had all kinds. So any one of those companies had Americans there as advisors or contractors, if you will, but they were contracted by the company, not the government. Nowadays we have a lot of contractors that work for the Department of War that are working for them, not the Grummans or whoever of the world. So that's why we were in Iran. And as I mentioned, I was a student at Tehran American School, so we had kind of our whole little ecosystem, if you will, where Tehran American School was, as you might imagine, mostly American kids. The Shah had a program where a certain number of Iranians from families, whatever, wealthy or well-placed or connected, were allowed to attend it as well. So we had Iranian peers who were in school with us, a few, not a lot. And then there was also a couple of other international schools that some of the Americans went to instead of Tehran American School. But for the most part, all the Americans were in the kids anyway were in those two, in that school. And then so as when we first got there, things were pretty normal. You couldn't really tell that there was any problem with a revolution happening. But
could you help me as far as that? How, let's just say, because it's different now. How did the women dress in Tehran? The time when you got there?
Yeah. So culturally, and the Shah, his father, and then the not the crown prince who's in exile now, but the Shah who was in power when I was there, and then his father, were really trying to westernize Iran. They wanted to bring in Western education. In fact, Iran was one of the first countries in the Middle East that had female doctors, and women had the right to vote and so on. So he was very Western thinking, and that caused some of the problems with the Islamists because they have a completely different view of women and what they should have access to. And so they dressed very Western. You would have a continuum. You would have the fundamentalists or the ones that were strict in their Islamic religion and culture who would wear it's called a chador in Farsi. By the way, they speak Farsi in Iran, and notice I'm saying Iran and not Iran. It's Iran. And they speak a different language. They don't speak Arabic. They don't consider themselves Arabs. They consider themselves a completely different culture. And so they would wear the chador. It was black typically, and it was a long thing that covered basically their whole body. And then you would have some that were kind of conservative, but not completely fundamentalist, if you will, that would wear like a headscarf and long sleeves and so on. And even, I was telling you before we started, like when my mother would go out into certain areas like the bazaar, the big bazaar, they call it the Grand Bazaar down in South Tehran, they would encourage them to wear a headscarf, long sleeves, don't expose your wrists, don't make sure your ankles aren't exposed. And we were fine with that. We respected the culture, and we didn't want to be, the ugly Americans as you hear. And so for the most part, we tried to do our part to conform and not be in their face. But most of the Iranians, especially in the part of town where we lived, because we lived in an area, northern part of Iran or Tehran, where it was near the Shah's palace. It was called the Niavaran Palace, which is in the northern part of Tehran. And so most of the foreigners, it was an affluent area, of course, and so on. So what we saw on a day-to-day basis would look more like Paris or London or something like that, 30 years ago or so. And that was kind of the Shah's thing. They wanted to make Tehran the Paris of the Middle East.
Oh, so very artsy, very cosmopolitan kind of a look, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And there were like,
fashion.
Discotheques, nightclubs, there was alcohol and so on, which you don't see. Like if you were to go to, because I've been to Saudi Arabia too, and not as a soldier, but just as a civilian. My father worked for Saudi Arabian Airlines after Iran, so that's how I ended up there for a little while. But they don't allow alcohol. They don't allow like nightclubs and things like that. And I'm not saying that these things are good necessarily, but it would be similar to Paris or Beirut, before the Palestinians ruined it, was very much like that too. It was a very Western, very pluralistic society. And that was the other thing about Iran. It was a very pluralistic society, meaning they were very tolerant of other faiths and things like that under the Shah.
And
there was,
today, most people would look at that and go, "You're crazy." They actually were like that, but
yes. And when I spoke in December after, the sermon I did in December, we talked about the Magi.
Yeah.
But there was also a very large Jewish community in Iran when I lived there. And a lot of the merchants that my mother dealt with, like we have Persian carpets, Persian copper, gold, all that sort of stuff. They were mostly Jews. Like one of her big guys, her favorite merchants she dealt, his name was Paul. Does that sound familiar?
That does sound familiar.
Yeah. And so a lot of these people were, Jewish blood, so to speak, and Jewish tradition. You think there are any of them left today in Tehran? No, of course not. So to say, and by the way, what I say today may not necessarily be the stance of the church. Some of this may be my personal opinion, but to say that Iran is better off today than it was under the Shah, I think is a gross statement.
I think anything that's under Sharia law and anything that is under the Islamists' leadership is dangerous.
Yes.
I think they're following a false prophet. I know. And they're also following it's not a religion, it's a political movement. It's a colonialist movement. Take over countries.
Conquest, imperialism, etc.
Yeah.
So anyway, Iran at that time, was very, very Western leaning, very pro. I mean, Jimmy Carter, again, my opinion, blew that one big time. I don't like the Carter administration, so they did a lot of things wrong, and this is just one of them.
Very kind man.
Yeah,
he had his heart was but
nice man, terrible president,
terrible leader at that time. Yes.
Yeah. So at any rate, I think that was a big fumble on our part, and the Middle East. I mean, if you think about 1970s, how much terrorism got out of the Middle East when you had the Shah, Saddam Hussein, and Assad in Syria.
Yep.
They were dictators, they were strongmen, but that's what those people understand.
Yep.
And they kept the Islamists under control. Might have stunk for the people that lived there,
absolutely.
Especially if you were leaning that way. Yeah. But for the West, it wasn't such a bad thing. So, ask yourself, is the world better off today because we got those people out of there? Think about that.
Yeah.
And what we're doing today in Iran, is basically trying to unravel, I think, 47 years of Islamists. And think about all the troublemakers in the Middle East now, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iranian proxy, the Houthis in Yemen, Iranian proxy, Hamas, Iranian proxy. It's all, they're getting the money, the training, etc., support from this exporter of Islamic terrorism. And if that country's taken off the map, off the chessboard, and becomes a Western-leaning, not even necessarily pro-West, but at least neutral, and no longer exporting this Islamism and terrorism, think about what that's going to do for the entire Middle East.
Well, yeah, especially when you have leaders that are saying, from the river to the sea, let's eliminate Jewish people, death to America. When someone says that kind of stuff, you need to believe them. You need to believe what they're saying, and because of their theology or their religious point of view or their political point of view, because it is all tied together, that says we need to eliminate these people. Their goal is, and we were talking about this, is basically to usher in the 12th Imam. That's what they want to do, right? And that comes through violence.
Yeah,
and chaos. And so to let a country like that have nuclear weapons who will use it instantly when they have the opportunity. I mean, look at who they're attacking. They're attacking all the Shiite?
So Iran's primarily Shiite, and most of the rest of the Middle East is primarily Sunni Islam. And what you're talking about, the 12th Imam, is part of the Shiite eschatology. Their end times theology that's not necessarily a Sunni belief, but I can guarantee you, once if the Jews and the Americans were off the stage, then they'd start killing each other, because they just have us to focus on right now. But once we're off the board, if we were off the board, they would go after each other, because they don't see, because they split, right?
Yeah.
It was the nephew of Muhammad when Muhammad died who led the Shiite faction, because they believed a certain way, and then the other one was Bakr or something like that. He was like a close, uh, confidant, if you will, and of Muhammad, and he felt like, no, I'm the true heir of Islam now, and so they split. And then that's why we have the two major. There's other sects of Islam, but these are the two major ones.
So as far as like what you see, you were in Iran. It was a cosmopolitan place.
Yes.
It had many different groups, and then what happened is you guys start seeing something happen there that made you move out of there, which was you said you started hearing machine guns or gunfire going off.
Yeah, you would see it as things, the first year was pretty normal. Then like I started my freshman year of high school in the fall of '78. And, they would bus us all to school, and you'd start seeing soldiers on street corners, armored personnel carriers, things like that. And, I was a kid, so I think my parents tried to kind of shelter me from it a little bit, but I'm sure my father was getting briefs at work because he was, working with the military and all of that. And then they finally got to the point where they felt like it was unsafe for the kids to even go to school. So they shut our school down. Martial law was declared. This is probably November-ish.
Okay.
And then we were basically dusted on. You were not to be outside, and they would even say, "Don't even go," because we had like rooftop balcony that we could go out on and look over the city. And they say you're subject to getting shot off the roof if you go out there. And we would go out there anyway because we were kids, knuckleheads, and you could hear the crowd start spooling up at night as soon as the sun went down, and then you would hear gunfire. A lot of times it was gunfire like overhead, like what they're doing today in Iran. They're murdering people, just gunning them down. The Shah didn't want to do that. So yeah, there were some people that got shot, but there weren't really a lot of people that got shot in the streets like that during the protests. Yeah, and that's another reason people say, well, the Shah was so bad, but look at what they have now compared to what the Savak, the Shah's secret police was nothing compared to the Islamic secret police that they have now. But anyway, things started to. We never really nobody ever really threw stuff. Every now and then we'd be walking up one of the main roads and you'd hear like Yankee go home or somebody yell it out of a car or something like that. But we never really experienced any direct threats or anything like that. But so we got out. So by the time I left in December of '78, they felt like the security situation was to the point where they wanted all Americans, certainly dependents. My father stayed later. He was there after the first of the year, into 1979. And
didn't your sister go out right after you?
Yeah, my sister.
But she couldn't take the same flight that you took.
Yeah, my older brother had left before me. My older sister was there. She left a little after me, and by the time she left, they had to get her out on a military
So it went
aircraft.
fast. So things were moving
so it went fast. And then my mother and my younger brother and sister got out sometime as well on a commercial airline as well. And then my father probably came out on a military transport as well, because he was there. I was telling you, the day after he left, the Iranian Air Force turned on the government. So they were the first branch of the military to side with the Islamists. What happened in Iran was the Shah abdicated, and then there was an interim leader. His name was Shapur Bakhtiar, and he was like basically a president, if you will.
Okay.
And that lasted about 15 minutes, and then the Islamists took over, and because you were mentioning the different parties that were players, the players in the unrest that led up to
Let's go through this real quick, because I want you to kind of pronounce them. November 4th, 1979 is when the embassy was taken. It says that there were 66 Americans that were caught up in that mess at that time. 52 were held for 444 days, and weren't released until January 20, 1981, which is when Reagan was sworn in.
Yes.
So he was sworn in, and suddenly we get the
Right.
the people back, which is kind of interesting. Something had to be said or done in that whole process of being released on his inauguration day. I don't know what, other than maybe he threatened them. Reagan seemed to be kind of that kind of president. I voted for him. So
First president I voted for.
yeah, same with me too. So you had Khomeini, who was with the Islamists.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one group. The People's Mujahideen,
Yeah.
and they opposed the Shah and clerical establishment, which is interesting that they,
Right.
okay, they're going to be gone. Then, how do you spell it or pronounce it? Tuda?
The Tudo, the Communist Party.
The Communist Party.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were eliminated immediately after this takeover.
Yes.
The National Front, which were secularists, they were eliminated right after all this took place. They don't want to. It's really interesting to see the bedfellows because
Yes. Mm-hmm.
a secularist with a Islamist, that makes no sense.
No.
But or a communist with a Islamist makes no sense. And then the National Front was hoping, the secularists were hoping that they would bring back the Iranian Constitution of 1906, which of course did not happen when the Islamists took over.
No.
And then the Islamic Freedom Movement of Iran, which got annihilated pretty quickly, apparently, too. What ended up happening is you had all these groups working together with the Islamists going, go ahead, be with us. And the minute they took over, they just got rid of everybody that was not their form of Islam.
Yeah, exactly.
And that seems to be a common thread. You were talking about the green-red.
The red-green alliance.
Explain that.
Yeah, so that's where you see communists and Islamists kind of aligning together to go against the ruling authority, if you will. Or like in our country, we have a red-green alliance right now in New York with that mayor they elected up there, Mamdani.
Yes.
And he's both, though. He's a communist and he's an
the
Islamist.
Perfect combination.
But guess which one of the the wolf you feed is the one that wins? Well, guess which wolf he's going to feed when there's a choice? It's going to be the Islamic wolf.
Yes.
And so,
his wife is, just by her writing, you know exactly where they stand.
And also, you've probably heard the term in Islam called taqiyya. It's to lie to advance Islam. So they're going to lie. They lied to all those people.
But it's a lie. It's a lie. They said you could get away with this if you're in a war. Now, what does that mean? War means I am against somebody. In their mindset, the war is I'm against a person that is a infidel. A person is not of our particular Sharia mindset, and therefore they're at war all the time. So they can lie to anybody at any time, and their Allah, their God, is great with that because you're you're helping with the movement to move forward. Yes, they lied to everybody on this list.
Yeah, they have. There's two houses. There's the House of Islam, the Dar al-Islam, and then the House of War. That's all of us. That's everybody that's not a Muslim.
Correct.
And so, guess what? If you're not in the House of Islam, you're in the other camp. Therefore,
you're our enemy.
You are our enemy.
And we are in war with you because we're to take over the world. That's what we're supposed to do.
Now, when they're the minority, like they are here, they're 10% or whatever. They're nice.
Well, they do a lot of whining and complaining. There's a whole kind of process that has gone through the whole thing, which is basically get a foothold, talk about the injustices that are against you, get more people behind you, get the useful idiots behind you, and not. I know it sounds insulting, but it's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
If you can get some people that believe that I'm an Islamist, a Sharia Islamist, who says in my theology and in my political views that everyone is someone that is against me. I'm to get rid of you or enslave you, one of the two.
Yeah.
You die or enslavement. And you believe that they're just going to pat you on the back and befriend you the whole time. It's just not going to happen, guys.
No, you don't have to theorize about this. You
It's
can
done.
see historical
It's been done.
examples of it. Oh, this is not the only example of this happening.
No.
So, to believe otherwise is just Pollyannish.
Well, and Iran, going back to Iran is not an Arab country.
No, they're Persians, if you will. The Persian Empire is, predates even the time of Christ by a couple thousand years. I mean, the beginnings of the and they're even in the Old Testament. We see the Medo-Persian Empire in the book of Daniel.
That's right.
And
they were the ones that got rid of Babylon, basically, and they came in and took over.
Exactly. They supplanted the Babylonians, and then Alexander supplanted the Persian Empire. And but Alexander was smart. He would have vassal states, so he would kind of just let them do their thing under his control. So they still existed as Persians even then. And there's been some ebbs and flows throughout that thousands of years since Christ and to what is now modern day Iran. But essentially, they're not Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. They speak Persian or Farsi. They don't consider themselves Arabs. A lot of them don't look like Arabs. They look different.
Yep. They were dispersed in this when this took place. There was a diaspora that you hear that within. Diaspora means people are dispersed everywhere throughout in Babylon. When Babylon took over with Nebuchadnezzar, he dispersed whoever they took over. He dispersed their people. That's why you end up with Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego hanging out in Babylon.
Exactly.
And he moved people to where he wanted to move them, left people where he wanted to live, because it couldn't do a revolt. It couldn't get enough people to do a revolt. So there's a diaspora of Iranian people who want this Islamist regime gone.
They want it gone, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. They do. And I mean, if you look at the protests that are going on within the country, these people are willing to risk their lives, and they are. Many of them are dying because they hate it. And now, from what I'm hearing, is the regime is importing like Al Qaeda and Taliban and stuff like that to come into the country to kill the Iranians because they can't get their own people to do it anymore.
Wow.
And some of them are even saying that a lot of the people that are in control are not even Iranians; they're Arabs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and they hate Islam for the most part. Their religious tradition is Zoroastrianism, which is more of a monotheistic religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Christianity, but it's definitely not, a Sharia law in Islam, and so on. But Islam's a fairly new religion in that part of the world.
Yes.
And so
it's a relatively new religion altogether. So.
Exactly. It's the newest of the three major.
Of the three big ones, yeah.
So they don't really consider themselves either Arab or Islam, or Muslims, I should say. And so they want that regime gone, and I think that would benefit the world for that regime to be gone.
And why would you think that, as a military person? And I know you know a lot of military people. So, why is it that you think that we would benefit from that?
Well, as we spoke earlier, they're seeking to have a nuclear weapon. They say they're not, but they're lying And so what do you think they're going to do with that weapon when they have it? They're not going to sit on it. They're going to use it on Israel. And if they could send it our way, they'd send it our way too.
Well, that's why they were working on ballistic missiles to expand.
Yeah. So that's a future threat, which we need to think serious about. The current threat problem, if you will, is they fund proxies all over the Middle East. For example, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas, etc., and so on, that all are terrorist organizations by our State Department's own, determination. I don't know if this thing's still on, but so if Iran, as it exists today, the regime, if they're taken off the chessboard and they're no longer funding these proxies, all that terrorism goes away. Yeah. And so that they're basically being choked off right now with the embargo, with the military campaign that's basically crippled them. It's set them back 2 to 3 decades militarily. Okay. If you listen to people like Victor Davis Hanson, he's a great military historian, and their analysis, people are far more qualified than me. analyzing it from a military perspective, we've had just between us and Israel, I've just done tremendously, certainly tactically and even strategically. There's people whining about Straits of Hormuz and the cost of oil, and those are real things. If you got to go fill your tank up, I get it. I don't want to pay $5 a gallon for gas either. But the long play on this, the price of oil is going to come down. And there's some other things going on geopolitically with all the oil stuff, because Venezuela was part of this equation too, because they were also moving Iranian oil, and the Chinese benefit the most from Iranian oil. So now the Chinese are being affected by this, who are not exactly our friend either. So there's a lot higher level strategically going on with all of this Iran war stuff that is above just what the current price of oil is right now. And I think it's also some of the Emirate states have become even more pro-U.S. now, because Iran's attacking them, and they thought it would drive them away from us. It's actually driving them to us.
Yes.
So they're proving themselves. And again, just by the fact that they're attacking these neighbors in their neighborhood, should give everybody a clue as to what they would do with a nuclear weapon
if they had the opportunity for it.
Yeah, so to kid ourselves and think that they wouldn't use it if they got it. So I do agree that they should never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
And then you have groups in the United States and in Europe. Europe's in trouble right now, and we're seeing that Britain is in trouble. Ireland just had a pastor who was arrested for speaking John 3:16,
right? Yeah,
in front of an abortion clinic, and he had never had that happen before, and they arrested him and fined him, and he goes, "The first time I've ever been jailed." He's like 78 years old,
right?
And he couldn't believe that in Ireland that would happen. But it's like this empathy, this
suicidal empathy.
Yes. It's toxic, that's for sure. And it looks like it's suicidal empathy. I know it's toxic empathy because they've let their empathy go. Oh yeah, these people are oppressed, and we're bringing them in, but then they're not wanting to follow our laws at all. And scripturally, when you hear a lot of people bring up, the sojourner or the alien, we're supposed to help them. Part of the process too, if you read in the scriptures when it talks about that, it also says they go under the law of what's going on in Israel at that moment. So when we want to help this sojourner, we want to help this person, but they're following the laws, and God actually got rid of the ones that didn't want to do that.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. So we have Islamists that are in Western countries that will not abide by the laws of our countries. So we're seeing a problem. I know you do a lot of traveling. Are you seeing more and more of a problem over in Europe?
I would not at this point I would not go to that part of the world. I would like to go to Israel, but I wouldn't go there right now just because of the war. And then, I'd love to go to Iran, but I'll never go back while that Islamic regime's in power. So I would stay away from that part of the world.
What about Europe itself and England?
Well, even Europe, like
because I studied at Oxford. I got to do that for a summer, and I would love to bring Tanya back there, but
no,
right now I would not go.
I would not go to the UK right now. From what I'm seeing, no, I wouldn't go. There's
I actually had friends tell me not to go. Literally said, "Don't go."
Eastern Europe,
crazy.
Fine. You're fine. Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, all of those are fine. Croatia, even Greece is fine, but. I would stay away from those, France, Germany not so much, but France and the UK especially. I would personally, and it's a shame because there's wonderful tourism there. We have a lot of shared culture and history.
Yes.
And to see them, going down the road that they're going down, and as you said, the empathy, I called it suicidal empathy, and there's people that have written books on that can justify why that's true. But
explain the suicidal.
Well, it's basically allowing people in. Like you mentioned sojourners and help those that are and so on. Well, first of all, if they're asylum seekers, the rules of asylum are you go to the first country that you can get to that is you're no longer being threatened. Well, there are 51 Muslim countries, many of them very wealthy. You know how many of them have reached out a hand to take in all these refugees? Zero. So then there must be something more behind why they're pushing all these aged males, especially, into Europe and into our country during the Biden administration. Yeah, you see families and all that here and there, but a lot of them are military-aged males. Gee, I wonder why that's happening. So you see all this going on, and then the Westerners are just like stupid. Now, again, you have a continuum of people, right? You have people who are globalists that are complicit in this because they want to remake Europe. They don't want it to be a free, pluralistic or even, Judeo-Christian culture. They want to water it down and make it basically so they can bring it all under their globalist control. But I'm getting, way off into.
But the problem is, you can't do that with Islamists.
Mm-mm.
It's an impossibility.
No, that's the thing. As we've pointed out, the different groups that we saw in Iran, and you can pick any one of these countries that, Afghanistan was a similar story to Iran. They will play the game with you. They'll tell you what you want to hear until they get the upper hand, or they're in a position where they can wipe you out, and then they will. Yeah. And they will do the same thing in Europe, and they'll do it here if they can get away with it. They believe that the entire world is to come under Islam. Now, granted, there's people that are more radical than others. 10% of them, they tell us, are the real jihadists. Well, if there's 1.2 billion of them in the world, that's 120 million of them that are hardcore.
You're talking about
jihadists.
1.2
billion Muslims.
Yeah, but how many are Sharia following?
Well, there's a lot more are Sharia following, because see, again, there's like if you live under Sharia law and you're a Muslim, you don't really notice, especially if you grew up in that culture, you don't really notice it. There's not this radical difference. But to come to our part of the world, where we're free, and women especially better take note, because
yes,
they get treated like second-class citizens in that system. And I don't know if I think we talked about this, in Iran, like when I was there and the Shah was in power, there were women doctors and professors and engineers and et cetera. They were part of society, judges, and in, I think even in elected office, because they had a parliament under the Shah. You think that's the case in an Islamic regime? No, of course not. So to kid yourself and to think that if they get the upper hand that they're going to just get along, no, they will not. Now, there's this thing called jizra, where if you don't want to become a Muslim, you pay a tax.
Yes.
But yeah, I think they really only do that in areas where they kind of have to put up with these people, so they let them pay the jizra. But they treat you like second-class citizens and so on, and you're paying a tax to keep your faith. And then, the more radical people will go after you and kill you eventually. So, we're kind of, veering off of Iran and getting more into just the whole jihad thing in general. But it is a threat to the West. And I think because you have this regime in place, they're funding it, and they're making it possible for these people to travel to other countries. Mm-hmm. And
so I remember you saying something. You said, because when you said you lived in Iran, and I went, wow. And he goes, and that's why what I'm seeing right now really upsets me. You said, and so it's primarily what you saw in Iran, you're seeing it now taking place in Europe and in America. Kind of the process of give an example of the LGBTQ, community. When you have people in that community saying, I'm pro-Palestine.
Right.
What are they doing? I mean, it's like these guys, the communists, what were they called? The Tuda? And yes, the Tuda is going, we don't believe there's God, right? The government's God, and the Islamists are going, okay, yeah, believe that until we're ready to get in there, and Allah is God, and you're going to die,
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't know how you help people not fall into that suicidal empathy world. it's hard to help somebody in that process if their mind is made up that they don't want to see a Judeo-Christian community, I guess.
You mentioned I've been fortunate to travel.
Yeah.
And, because I've traveled and lived abroad and all of that, I've seen a lot of the world.
Yeah.
And what we have in this country is very unique. This freedom is not typical.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the problem is a lot of these people that are, queers for Palestine or whatever, women that are like, I want to live under Sharia law. Well, they've never actually been out of this country. They've never been to a country where there's really Sharia law in place. And if you were to go to a place like that and have to live under it, you would be miserable, especially somebody who's grown up in the West where we tolerate so much. We probably tolerate too much. And the Judeo-Christian worldview, although they don't want to admit it, that we live under in the West, that has informed and influenced our laws and our cultures and our traditions for thousands of years now, they don't think the same. It's a completely different worldview and mindset over there. And I think if, they were exposed to that, they would have a really serious wake-up call. Well, you just look at some of these foolish women that went when ISIS was a bigger player, and they went and said, I want to become an ISIS bride and all of this. And like within a month, they're like clamoring to try and get back to the West.
Please get me back.
And they hate it. They can't, and a lot of them are trapped. They got trapped. And I think that's part of the problem is, you grow up in the West, especially if you get a college education in the United States nowadays, those are like, for the most part, are just leftist seminaries and, they're anti-American, anti-West, et cetera. So the nonsense that they're learning in these universities, especially in the non-hard sciences and things like that, they've had they have a skewed vision of what reality is, and they've not lived outside of these bubbles that they're in where they can sit around and pontificate about how wonderful the world's going to be when all these people that support Orange Man are gone and all these conservative Christians are gone and all of that. It's like, well, what you're going to be left with is this, Sharia law.
Yeah, and the fight between Islamists, communists, secularists, all fighting, and every time the Islamists win. I mean, that seems to be the case, and that's
because you look at the countries like Egypt was communist leaning, now it's basically an Islamist state.
But it is.
Syria, communist leaning, now it's an Islamic state. They supposedly have a reformed ISIS guy that's running the country, but we'll see how long that mask holds up. And anyway, so you just see it all over North Africa. Same thing. Gaddafi was gone, and now I don't know what's going on in Libya, but it's probably warring factions of different Islamist factions and so on. So,
now we bring all that stuff up. What would you suggest for people, and I'm trying to find it right now, for people who are going, okay, I hear all this, but biblically, what do I need to be doing? Right? What do I need to do right now in my small part of the world?
Yeah, well, and
relating to this,
we've done this before. We've done it on this podcast, and we've had IMO, International Muslim Outreach, come in and do some classes. They're here, and maybe that's because you and I, if we were to go to those countries and preach the gospel, we'd get killed or at least thrown in jail, probably killed. But right now, we can still preach the gospel. We can share the gospel. We can share biblical truth with Muslims that are here. And maybe God's bringing them here so that we can lead them to faith in Christ. And the good thing about them is they do have spiritual beliefs. They do have supernatural. They believe in a supernatural world. They call us people of the book, right? Because they still, they believe Abraham and David and a lot of these other people that are they believe Jesus.
Well, not the same Jesus.
They believe they do believe he's a prophet. They do not believe he's the Son of God or that he died on the cross. But, we have, there is a baseline to work with there that maybe I talked about, the people that grew up in the university in the United States. They're so post-Christian and they don't even have a clue what's in the Bible. No. So now most Muslims have never heard of Jesus or seen a Bible either. They don't even understand their own faith for the most part, most of them. So if we have them here and we can share our faith with them, then that's
That's
how
what we need
that's
to do.
that's how we win this war, so to speak, is we lead them to faith in Christ, because the Bible tells us that God doesn't want any to perish, that all should come to the knowledge of truth. And it says, though, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. So none of them are beyond. Osama bin Laden, before he died, could have turned to Christ and could have become a believer.
Yes.
Because that's what the Bible tells us. And there are examples of terrible people that were terrorists, and like there's a guy that's the son of that founder of Hamas. It's now a Christian.
I heard about that.
And so and so on. So God can work miracles in these
Paul
situations.
was trying to kill off
Paul's
the way of Christianity, early Christianity.
Exactly. So we, here we have these modern people that are literally murdering. Like, what is it, Nigeria? Yep. There's 100,000 Nigerians have died. Christians have been murdered in the last 4 years or whatever by Islamists. So you can't necessarily lead them to faith over there, but right now we still can. And so we don't want them to get the upper hand on and implement Sharia law and those kind of things here, because then we won't have that freedom.
Right. I think we also need to be wise too. You know the truth, and the truth will set you free or make you free, depending on which translation. We need to know the truth of what the Bible says. We need to be able to converse that, as you said, with people that are in the Islamic world. We also need to stand against it when it's there, and when people are talking about it as this is a positive thing for our country and for our nation and for your kids. All you have to do is go back to history and all you have to do is go back to Iran itself and what happened to people in Iran 50 years ago. And it was a culture change, but also a change of a lot of people dying and a lot of damage being caused around the world.
Yeah, they're causing trouble throughout the world now, and they're doing it under the guise of proxies, but it's pretty clear who's funding them.
Yeah. So we just need to know the word, obviously, but secondly, to be honest with folks, but to go and tell the good news, and only our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is going to change their lives. Change them.
Yeah, ultimately, it's it's that changed their heart, and let's lead them to faith in Christ. And there's excellent resources out there. There's people out there far more qualified than me to as apologists against what Islam teaches and how to address Islamic arguments against Jesus, and they claim our Bible's corrupted and all these things. That's what social media is a double-edged sword. There's a lot of vapid, useless stuff out there, but there's also some great stuff on apologetics and so on, specifically related to sharing your faith with Muslims.
Yep.
And that's an opportunity, and it's a process. You're not going to one day lead them to Jesus, because they can be killed for leaving their faith. Yes. And a lot of them are. It's called honor killing, and they will. And in certain parts of the world, it still happens, and even in the West, it's happened a little bit, not too much, but it will happen even in the West. So it's a process, and it's a big step for them to leave the faith, but it is possible, and there is hope.
Well, and that's what we want to keep. We want to keep the front of hope. But very cool that your experience with Iran and what's going on with Iran now, and just the thoughts of what do we do with this? And again, it's the gospel. It's always the gospel, and always go back to the gospel, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a great, great day. Remember Jesus Christ, what he said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. So let's put that out there. Give that message to as many people as possible. God bless you. Have a great day. And thank you, Randy.
Yes, amen. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts alone. TIMFD is produced by the awesome Alex Korn. And until next time, have a great day, stay grateful, grounded, and growing in Christ.